An objection usually means they're interested. If their objective is like, I'm interested, but it's not like, oh, I don't want in. The objection, like, I don't really want this at all, is a different objection. But the objection, like, yeah, it's a bit much. That tells me it's like there's value here, but it's a bit much means something, and you don't know exactly what it means.
What is going on inside, and dealing with that first, because that is going to color everything that you say. Your facial expressions, your body language, your tonation, all of that is coming directly outside of what's going on inside of you.
If there's other people solving this problem, it's a good indication. Like the competition thing is a good thing. You see lots of people solving this type of problem, that's great.
Pay attention to what is the persona, what are the aspects of our life, or the type of person we want to work with that we're putting out there, because I think there's a direct correlation with who we end up attracting. What's up, Coaches Nation? Another amazing episode of the Coach's Journey podcast. I am one of the co-hosts for today, Dr. Sherry Llewellyn, here with an amazing Daniel Fernandez. And we have a really action-packed episode for you today. It's what I feel like we should call like the triple threat, or maybe the triple takeaway. I don't know. We're still workshopping the name. Let us know. But we're going to be tackling 3 huge challenges that most coaches face. So first, we are breaking down perspectives around objection handling, because I don't know about you, but like objections are the thing that make the whole sales process for me a little bit nerve-wracking. And I'm super interested to hear Daniel's perspective on how he handles them. I'll share one of the perspectives around how I handle it. And then we're going to jump into 2 more cool topics. One is about getting your ideal clients. How does that process work? We're going to unpack a couple things for you there that can be really helpful. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about using storytelling to attract those clients. So action-packed, triple takeaway, triple threat day. Super excited for this.
Awesome. Sherry, thank you for doing such a great job of intros. I love hearing you do the intro because you're so good. You're so good at intros.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're good at a lot of things, but that's one I just appreciate right now.
And for those of you watching this or listening to this, we do not edit our podcast. And so if I screw up or if I flub over something, you're going to hear it. And sometimes I do, but I think it's kind of fun to be like on the spotlight and having to perform like the first time. It's do or die, just keep on going.
Yeah, because we're like in our community, we broadcast this live unedited. Like, and later on, we have somebody on our video team that will upload the podcast to the official podcast and all that stuff. But right now we're live in our community, and our community gets to see the podcast early and gets to see it completely unedited. So whatever we screw up, they'll see that. And maybe they'll get a little extra that we didn't have time to put in the full podcast. So there's lots of little bonuses that you'll get that aren't part of the final podcast. So if you're in our community watching right now, thank you for being part of our community. And thank you for putting up with our little mistakes here and there, because there's not such thing as mistakes. There's only learning.
Absolutely. So Daniel, let's dive into objection handling. And I'm curious, think back to all of the clients you've had or potential clients you could have had over the last like decade, I think, that you've been coaching, or close to a decade. Can you think of like the craziest objection that you've ever had?
Yeah, I don't want to go for it. I don't want to do it. I'm like, there's nothing I can do about that one, probably. Then again, there could have been. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't want to do it. But that's not the craziest, but it's the one that hurts a lot. You're like, do I just suck? It's like, what did I do wrong? It's like, it's really easy to take objections personally. So I guess let me start off by saying the biggest pain and challenge that coaches have around objections, I think, is getting them. Is like getting them and like the emotional feeling of that. And what that means for us, it can be, especially in the beginning, it's really easy to take that personally. So my number one rule of coaching, it applies everywhere, is it's not about you. So get out of your own head, get out of your own heart for these objections. This is about the client. Because if you really want to be a great coach, you have to always remember it's about the client. So when they have an objection, that's a true objection for them. Or maybe it's just the surface of the objection. But whatever, there's something for them that matters. If you're a great coach, you'll be like, "Ooh, I'm really curious about that." Not like, "Oh, they don't want me." That's about you, that little reaction, right? The reaction about them is the response. It's intentional. You don't react, you respond to the client about the client. So it's not about you. So you can explore that objection. You can tell me more. There's a lot of things you can do with an objection, whatever that objection is, even if it's like something that you don't think you're ever going to overcome. And I don't have to think back that far to a recent objection. This is a renewing client that I offered them two options. I offered them the 6-month package, and I offered them the 1-year package. They usually just sign up for me, renew every 6 months. It's the first time I've offered them a year-long package. And I was thinking about this. I gave them a bunch of bonuses. I made it cheaper than double. It was like as I thought through this, I used the "it's not about you" rule, and I said, like, what would this make this client super excited about this deal? So I put it together. I sent it to them, and I thought to myself, like, this is the craziest deal ever. It's so good. They have to be crazy not to answer. But then in their little session intake before we had our session, after I'd sent the package, they said a little. I said, anything else you want to share? And they said, oh, I'm thinking about going for the 6 month. I'm like, okay, mental note, they want 6 months. And inside I was like, oh man, I put so much work into that. And I can't believe they would just go for 6 months. And then I caught myself, I'm like, that's about me. Relax, go into the conversation, do a great job, and then explore why they thought that and what is going on. So we went in there and I had a great session with them. And at the end of the session, I had planned for a little time. And they, I said, like, oh, can we talk about the proposal a little bit? And they're like, yeah, we wanted to. And so we talked about it, and they said, well, like, yeah, it's just a lot. I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. And is the challenge, like, is it the amount, or is it the, what is it a lot around? Like, I didn't even know what they meant by a lot. So I said, well, it's just like, it's a lot up front. And then I heard the words up front, like, oh, it's an upfront thing. So maybe it's just cash flow for them. And so I said, would it be easier if we split into 2 payments? If you make the commitment today, you can get all the bonuses there. And they didn't seem that enthusiastic about the bonuses. I'm like, these bonuses are crazy. Like I had some stuff with another provider, something I'm working with that will give them a special workshop and a bunch of sessions in a specific area that they are really interested in right now, profitability as an example. And so they said, oh yeah, that would be interesting. So we talked there. I said, what if we paid half now, half in 3 months, if you make the commitment today? They're like, oh, that would work. And then we talked through it a little bit, and they were like much more easy. I'm like, and it sounds like you didn't quite like catch all the bonuses in there. She's like, I looked at it, but ultimately, like I walked through, I said, let me just walk you through each one so you understand what it is. And so then I realized in sending her the package, I assumed she would like see it from my lens and like go through each thing and think about it. But no, they're just glancing at it like, oh, there's a bunch of bonuses, whatever. So I walked through them one at a time. I said, this is what this is. And we talked about it. Now this is what this one is. And we talked about it. And I said why I thought it was valuable for you. And they're like, oh, is this that? And I'm like, no, it's like more like this. And so because we have the existing relationship, we have a trust together. And so they understood that I'm giving a lot of value here. And then there's a few extra things in there. And so by the time we got to the end, we were both super excited. I was supercharged. And then it was like really clear. They agreed, let's do the 1-year plan. I'm like, great. And so, I mean, they didn't send me the money right away. I have to check and see if it came in, but they did agree, and I trust that. And so we have a year-long contract. And that might be the future. We'll see. So that was like, it was like, all I had to do is like stay back and not react and not be like, oh, come on. That's not going to work. Like, oh, but I feel bad. That's not going to work. Don't guilt your clients. So number one, it's not about you. Number two, an objection. Here's another real key point that I was reminded of in this discussion, in this story. An objection usually means they're interested. If their objective is like, I'm interested, but it's not like, oh, I don't want in. The objection, like, I don't really want this at all, is a different objection. But the objection, like, yeah, it's a bit much. That tells me it's like there's value here, but it's a bit much, means something, and you don't know exactly what it means. So be happy, give them space, keep the energy high, and it's okay. Lastly, it's okay if you're clunky with it. It takes reps. It takes practice. I still have sales conversations that I screw it up and I go clunky through it and I do a terrible job of an objection or whatever. But I'm like, I know that's part of the process and it's okay. I'm just going to continue the conversation and try to keep that focus on the client and what is valuable to them. And oftentimes it's like, what would be more valuable to you? That's a great question. Like, what would make this so valuable to you you couldn't say no? And then they just tell you like, okay, let's do that, or somewhere in between, so there's a way to do it. So that's kind of my thought on objections.
I love everything that you said. And the first thing that popped into my mind towards the end of your conversation, Daniel, was, oh, Daniel's okay with being a mediocre salesperson at times.
Yes, 100%. You have to be okay with it. because you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be like the perfect
Yeah.
salesperson. You just have to get better and better and better. And that means you're going to go through those mediocre hurdles, right? Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome. But what I really loved, and I think your example highlighted beautifully, is your ability to self-manage your internal dialogue and be able to focus back on what the client needed and helping bring clarity there, because that's ultimately the client is saying yes or no based on their clarity and based on the application to their life. And so you were very responsive to kind of getting all of that dialed in and walking through it. And so I love that. And I think that's a great example of not being externally reactive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be really hard. It can be really hard. And that's why you got to do your own work as a human, as a coach. And this is true not just in coaching sales. There's objections in your marriage, in your family life, with your friends. Like we would all benefit from being better at handling objections in a positive way, right? In a collaborative way. That's the key word.
Absolutely. And what you reminded me of, Daniel, so what I would like to contribute to the conversation is that the reminder that we, even as coaches, I think we tend to interact in the world in a very egocentric way. Meaning, it's just the fancy term that we all interact in the world from our own lens. And that is just how I see it as that's our baseline of humanity. Now, as coaches, I think we have a ethical responsibility to be able to learn how to not be so egocentric all the time and to be able to genuinely put somebody else's hat on or get in somebody else's shoes or different glasses, whatever metaphor you want to use, to be able to see what they might be experiencing. And the reason this is so powerful and important of a concept with sales and just your functioning as a coach is I have had a lot of experiences where I am talking with a client and I am, or a potential client, and I am feeling a little financial stress at home. I just did our budget, or I'm just balancing bank accounts for business and all this sort of stuff. And I'm feeling a little pressure. And then I have a sales call with a potential client, and then they give me a financial objection. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, girl, I feel you, or man, whatever, like, I feel you. I'm right there with you. And yep, there we go. Like, I short circuit the conversation because I am experiencing their objection through my own objection. This happens all the time in coaching too. Like, I remember this is the most vivid of the sessions that I've experienced this. I was meeting with another client. She's of similar age. Obviously, she's a woman too. She's a mom. And she got to a point in our conversation about being frustrated that she can't control herself around Halloween candy. And I know, right? It impacts like it, yeah, like of all around the earth. It's the Halloween candy that is her like nemesis, is her kryptonite. And I remember thinking in that exact moment, girl, I can't control myself around sugar either. And immediately my next thought inside my head was, and how am I ever going to help her? Because that's my problem. And it's that dialogue, it's that egocentric perspective that this is my problem too, and I haven't even fixed myself. So how the heck am I going to help fix somebody else? I think that can get in our way. And what I so appreciated about this woman is I kept that internal dialogue to myself and I asked her coaching questions and helped her through. And she actually had a really big breakthrough within just a few minutes. And it was amazing. And it was totally an affirmation to myself that, oh yeah, Sherry, just because you have an issue doesn't mean you can't help other people with an issue. And that applies to the sales process as well. If their objection might also be your objection, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't as a coach, because sales is just another part of the coaching process that we can't successfully help them understand deeper what that objection is about and help them overcome that. And so let's recognize that we have this tendency as humans to be egocentric. and really work at getting ourselves out of our own head, out of our own perspective, out of our own emotional capacity, and really help the client see what their capacity is. What are your thoughts on that,
Wow,
Daniel?
I really love that story because it's not just about objections. It's about a lot of things, but objections are very similar. It's like, get out of your own way. And what
Absolutely.
you said you kept it to yourself, but actually I think there's a level deeper that you did. What you meant is to say you didn't share that, and
Right.
you took it out of your head and started focusing on them again and ask them their exploratory questions. So you can acknowledge yourself. Oh, I had this thought that's leading me somewhere away from the client into myself.
Yes.
I have my own insecurities and all that. You were able to say, okay, insecurity, okay, thought, okay, struggle in my life. This is not about me. I'm
Yeah.
going to put you aside and let you go. Right. And then you came back and said, and you were with the client,
Yes.
and they had a problem that you could solve. You could help
And
them.
And actually, as I'm thinking about it, I think there was a little bit of the not resistant, that's probably not the best word, a little bit of the competitive spirit of mine. I'm that it's like, I recognize that was my own issue. And I'm like, okay, come on, Sherry, let's see if we can do this. Let's prove to myself that I'm better than my own issues with other people, kind of like, can I
Good.
prove it to myself that I could do it?
Yeah. And obviously you can. Obviously you can. And here's the other benefit of having a problem the client has. Sometimes you can use that and say, like, I've struggled with that too, but I've had some things that work. You can at some point get some credibility in this area, or you could say I've conquered it, or you could let it go and have them conquer it themselves. There's so many options that you have as a coach.
Yeah.
You can do a lot with it. And the way you handle it, Sharon, I love that you didn't let your issue make the client's issue worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. Because you have kept the focus on them. And that's a lot harder to do when you're struggling with your own emotional stuff. And one of the benefits of this is, as you coach her, let me guess, Sharon, as you coach her, you got more strength to deal with your struggle in this area, didn't you?
I can't say that I've 100% conquered it, but it has given me a more flexible perspective and maybe a little less guilt or shame around it. Yeah, so it's definitely helping people with a challenge that you have as a coach or I have as a coach is definitely a fun challenge that can change the way you think about your own challenges. Absolutely.
Something I love about coaching is that very frequently I'm coaching something that I've struggled with or currently have comes up. And through the coaching of them, I am reminded of what's important and reminded of some of the things that I need to remember or focus on that I haven't. And it's very obvious, like, I will improve as a result of this conversation too. So this conversation is inspiring me too. So I love that sort of side benefit of being a coach, is that you learn as you coach too. You
Absolutely.
get embedded back in the process of improvement, and you can't not get better quickly as a coach if you're coaching people.
I love it.
Like, if you're
So
there and present.
So there's a million and one ways that we could dice up this type of conversation about sales objections, but we wanted to talk specifically about what is going on inside and dealing with that first, because that is going to color everything that you say, your facial expressions, your body language, your tonation, all of that is coming directly outside of what's going on inside of you. So take this conversation as an opportunity to dig deep on what's going inside so that when you do the tactical things of sales objections, that it's being delivered in a way that's more consistent with how you would want. All right. So
Awesome.
second topic. Remember, we're doing the triple threat today. So first topic was about sales objections and then our own internal experiences around that and how that impacts. Second topic we're going to shift into is ideal clients. How do we get more of them? Does it even matter? What is your reaction to that, Daniel?
It both doesn't matter. It also matters. It depends. Like, my favorite answer is, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on where you are in your coaching journey, how much clarity you have. But something I'm thinking about a lot right now. So I'll just share my history. I've had a very diverse group of coaching clients. One of the threads that kind of pulls people together is leadership. But oftentimes I'm working on relationships and influence. Oftentimes I'm working on business. Oftentimes I'm working on strategy, life visioning, getting clarity. There's so many pieces of what I do. It's been a challenge for me to identify a specific avatar, a specific, niche in client that is my ideal. But I'm actually actively working on this a lot right now, because I've recognized, as I continue to get experience in coaching, and you can become a successful coach. You can sell coaching client packages at 5 figures and above and have a roster of clients that you keep. But at some point, you'll realize it's going to be a lot more efficient and a lot less work to have something that you're known for, to have a brand that makes sense. It's okay if you don't, especially in the beginning, because you are evolving, figuring out what is that? What do I do? Who do I help? How do I help them? What do I love doing? What kind of clients do I love? What kind of things do I hate? Where's my energy? What's unique about me? There's some big questions here. And for coaches, it's really challenging. So I would encourage everybody, if you're thinking about this question, get in conversations with people about this. Ask your clients, hey, like, what is it about me that makes me unique in your mind? Like, what's so special about me? I'm starting to do this with clients. I'm going back and asking clients, questions about, what makes me different and those kinds of questions. And so I want to bring it back here. This is something I'm learning to apply in this area right now. And it goes back to my number one rule about coaching. It's like the guidebook. It's like, it's not about you, Daniel. It's about them. And I've been really thinking about this concept. Like, it's really, really easy. And I still get stuck here sometimes. And I have to just jog myself out of it, which is, what do I do? What do I want to do? What is my coaching about? Like, what is the things I want to coach on? The part that you miss when you do that, or that I'm missing when I do that, I'm recognizing more and more, is that's about me. That's about me. And it has nothing to do with whether anybody cares or with what's going on in somebody else's life. Even if I had an ideal client, they don't care what I offer. What they care about is what's going on for them and what their problems are. So what I'm really trying to think about is, what is a problem that I can be really great at solving that people have? And not only people, but people that I can get to have. And secondly, not only like a problem they can solve, but a problem that needs to be solved and hopefully needs to be solved soon, like a problem with some level of urgency to it, right? And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to figure out, what is that problem? So I need to do a lot of work here. I need to think about, like, out of all the people that I could reach, what problems do they have? And which ones are the ones that are most likely to make a big impact soon on them, right? And so as I think about that, I might realize, like, that's not the stuff that I'm used to doing. And I need to get over that, because that's about me. Like, the stuff I'm used to doing, stuff I want to do, is about me. That's actually secondary. I'm learning to apply this in this area, which is, let's make it about them. Let's figure out, what do they actually need? Where do my strengths apply? And sometimes one thing I'm worried about right now in this process, and I love that I'm sharing this like totally vulnerably, that I don't have a great answer here, but I think the process will help people think about this. It's possible that of all the people I look at and think about who I might be able to reach, their problems and urgent problems are not the ones that I would love to solve. The ones I would love to solve are the ones that I would love to solve, which is about me, which makes it a lot harder to sell. And it makes it a lot harder to convince people and have credibility in that area. So I'm wondering if what's going to happen is I'm going to have to build some skills. And my current thinking is, it's okay, Daniel. You need to like live with the client's problem and solve their problems. And if you need some skills to be able to position yourself that way, if you need to build some more credibility in an area, that's okay. Do it. But think about what's the problem. And if there's other people solving this problem, it's a good indication. Like, the competition thing is a good thing. If you see lots of people solving this type of problem, that's great, because you know that there's a market for it and people are willing to pay for it. A lot of the times it's like, oh, I used to do like holistic coaching for your whole life. But most people are not walking around for that. Some people might be. It just takes a lot longer to get to them and to help them identify that's what they're looking for and that's what they need and will make the biggest difference. So I'm going to be going through this process. I'll keep the community updated on that as I learn, but I'm really, really focused on it right now, because I want to be able to build a thing that I'm known for. And also, as a result of doing that, I'll be able to build a more cohesive personal brand. And then that itself will be the thing that attracts other people. I can say specifically, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Who do you know? To people in my network. Because if I can't say that, which today I could kind of say it, but it's not very clear and they don't know how to share it. I've seen that over and over again with all the referrals I'm getting. It's like, well, they didn't really clearly share who the right client is, because I don't know. I don't have total clarity there. It can help a lot of people, but that's not really where I want to focus this. So that's a big challenge for me to do. And I want to work on it. I'll work on it in the community too, and keep people updated.
Awesome. Hey, Daniel, can I ask a couple questions around that?
Please. Please.
What, if you were to ask your past clients and your current clients what their top 3 areas of improvement, change, growth, solutions that you help them achieve, Like, what do you think some of that list would be?
One of the things that comes to mind immediately that like always comes up, no matter what we're doing, is handling really hard conversations, whether it's with your spouse or your kids or your coworkers or your boss or your team if you're an entrepreneur, or people who are like not having, you know, you're not having a great interaction with, or they're disappointing you. People avoid conflict even at very high levels in business, and so that's something that comes up a lot. Hard conversations, and I'm really good at helping them figure that out. I should apply some of that more to myself sometimes. But like having hard
And
conversations.
can I just say, Daniel, I have seen you do that really well in the business relationship that we have and have had and continue to have with other people too. So I affirm that you are really good at getting messy in these situations and kind of trying to sort things out and really work hard at trying to figure out what the most, I guess, positive or constructive is a better term, the most constructive outcome could possibly be. So I think that's awesome that that is also part of what you end up doing with your clients.
Yeah. So here's a question I can apply to this whole topic, and thanks for thinking through this with me, Sherry. Like, is that a problem that people in who I can get to and in my network will know people with that problem or be that people with that problem? And I think the answer is yes, because everybody has that problem. So is it specific enough? Then maybe I can define it more clearly. Like, is it entrepreneurs? Is it business relationships? Because like the more specific I can be here, I think the better the ability to say like, that's the problem I solve. Like, okay, business people with partnerships. Okay, that is something I have lots of experience in and can make a huge difference in. That is a hugely valuable, but do those people understand how valuable that is? I've had a couple conversations with partners and they're like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but you know, we're just going to go for it. I'm like, okay, maybe I could do a better job of explaining what's going to happen when you do that way, you know, the cost of it. But yes, this could be an area that I focus on. Thank you, Sherry, because like that's not a bad idea. That's one area. The other area is kind of like thinking through strategy and tactics and execution of staying on target with like, what's your, like, I'm really good at helping people clarify, what is the vision? What do you want your life to look like? And who are you going to have to show up as, and how do we grow into that? And what do you need to make that happen? And then, you know, regularly taking execution, staying focused on the things that matter. That's another thing I'm good at. So I think those both go together in some different ways. So here's where I go astray. It's like, and then I have this, and then I have that, and then I have this, and then I have that. And then I have music, and I want to integrate music in this somehow, which I think I could do no matter what it is. So it's like, I can go really deep on the rabbit holes here, but my coaching business to go to the next level, it's got to be more focused. It's got to be. And so I need to think, this is a great question you're asking. Like, what will people say that I'd really help with? And that's not at all how I'm framing it right now. It's not at all how I'm framing it right now, but I can totally see myself building a community around it.
Yeah.
You know, like avoidance and conversations and conflict and all that stuff. So.
And I love that you're sharing this, Daniel, because I know a lot of coaches that are listening to this are going to see themselves in parts of your story as you're sharing it. And some solutions to moving your brand identity, your value proposition, which all funnel into then who is my ideal client, all of that packages together is how have you best served people in the past? That's a data point. I think that there's a potential, like when I think about some of the clients I've served, I don't know that I would want to continue to serve them, but here's the deal. That's a data point. And the data point, all of your coaching that you've had in the past, yours, Daniel, as well as the coaches that are listening and watching, all of the clients that you've coached, or all of the beta coaching, all of the free clients, whoever, they're all data points that either help refine who or help refine who not. It's one or the other. And I think it's valuable to recognize that so that we don't feel like, oh, I just like, that was a waste. Nothing's a waste. I think there's an opportunity to be able to use every person, every interaction, every conversation to give us clarity, either towards or definitely not. And you have so much experience, Daniel. I'd be curious if you did literally go back and ask clients, and even clients you don't meet anymore, because they're going to have lived life now. And how have they stayed and remained changed, improved and grown based on your work? Like, these are questions that I think really could give you some powerful information, and coaches that are listening could also help you give powerful information about what are the results you actually deliver on, and then use that as some of the data points for how to, refine your future of coaching.
Yeah. And I've actually started going back to clients and be like, hey, can I have a conversation with you about what coaching has brought, and maybe if you'd like to do testimonial, we can do that or something like that. And it's a slow process. People won't get back to you quickly enough with their testimonial because they're like, oh, I don't know how to do testimonial. And you have to give them the questions, and then like, well, how do I do these questions? And then you give instructions. And so I'm learning how to like make this a better process to ask the questions in different ways. And maybe I can do it more simply, just like, let's get hop on a 15-minute call. So I'm working on that. So I'm curious what will come up from it. But something I'm thinking about right now in this moment is like business conflict coaching. That feels like really, it sounds like a term that nobody's used. Like I haven't heard that before. So it could be that. Yeah, I'm gonna let that sit for a bit and see where that goes.
Yeah, I love that.
With my wife and with other people. I recommend everybody, when you have an idea like that, talk it over with people, get to more clarity with it. Thank you, Sherry, for giving me a little bit of opportunity to get more clarity right now. It's those little iterations of clarity that you'll get, but talking through it, writing it down, whiteboarding it, and asking your clients, all these things you can do to help yourself come to a decision. And you can just date that niche. You don't have to like stay there. Like I could be a business conflict coach for a while, and then I was like, this isn't quite it, and then I can change it. That's okay. You can change it. So
totally okay. Yeah. I have pivoted. Maybe pivot is the wrong term. I've iterated multiple times in my coaching journey. So I started out as a clinical licensed psychologist, and I took anybody and everybody. I would say my most bizarre clients I ever had, like way outside, was a gentleman many, many years ago who was actively psychotic. Well, let me rephrase that. He has schizophrenia, and sometimes I would see him and he would be psychotic, and other times I would be meeting with him and he would be lucid and normal, and it was hard. That would not be my ideal client. I know psychologists that really thrive in that, what's called severely and persistently mentally ill. That's like the category of the intense diagnoses that will probably never change in that person's life. That was hard, not my ideal client. So I just think through, and then all the way to lighthearted clients that are just fun and refreshing to meet with, and then anywhere in between. And as I pivoted out of traditional mental health and into the coaching world, and now like having these conversations, and I will tell you, if I had not been part of Coaching Mastery community, I would not have had the knowledge and the framework and the conversations to have a lot of these conversations about who do I really want to attract, because I never had to think about that as a mental health professional. I just got whoever. I live in a town that's smallish. It's about 70,000, and everybody knew of me in my clinic, and they just came if they had insurance or could pay, whatever. So I never really had to think about sales and attracting clients. I just took whoever walked in the door. But as a coach, that is not at all my experience. I thought it was at the beginning. I made a website, right? I created a website. I had some cool looking posts and expected just to get people to come to me like it did before. And that was not at all what happened. And so that being part of the Coaching Mastery community helped me refine and understand the things I actually have to actively do and figure out in order to have the biggest impact and the type of impact that I want. And honestly, I am still feel like I'm kind of pivoting, or again, pivoting is feels to me like going like a 180, and it's really just like a little bump. I have worked with entrepreneurs, is kind of how I started in coaching. I did some work locally with some local business owners around leadership, because that's where I was growing the most significant in my own journey. So I'm like, oh, I can help other people. And that was fun. But then when I shifted into high performance coaching virtually, I started broadening and was kind of entrepreneurs. And then I've worked with people that aren't entrepreneurs. And then I've worked with people that are retired and trying to figure out the last part of life. And then I've worked with moms that are, and just all of these things. But what I've noticed, and I'm not saying that all coaches need to be this way, but what I've noticed for myself is my role identities that I have found it most gratifying when I work with other people that also have similar roles in their identity. So I'm a mom of 4 teenagers. I have a lot of compassion and understanding for what moms go through. I'm a multi-business entrepreneur. I understand that. I have a huge faith part of my life. I understand that. Huge into real estate investing. So I do a lot of coaching in that realm. So all of these areas are things that really I've noticed I tend to gravitate towards, but also because that's what I put out in the world. I do a lot of posts, a lot of videos on all of these areas. So it kind of just attracts those people. So I think it's just really interesting to pay attention to what is the persona, what are the aspects of our life, or the type of person we want to work with that we're putting out there, because I think there's a direct correlation with who we end up attracting. And just being super intentional about that, I think can be super helpful.
I love that, Sherry. So I'm gonna ask you a question in turn. If you take all those things, those pieces, those people that you're attracting, all the things that you're doing, and you put
Yeah.
it all together, is there a particular problem that is urgent and what people will pay for, that they are paying for today somewhere,
Yeah.
that jumps out at you? Anything?
That people are paying for, that phrase is the
Yeah.
part that I'm the most unclear about. What I get the most excited about with regards to conversations is helping other families create an atmosphere that helps the entire family level up in their family life, which includes having difficult conversations with kids and really developing a strong parental relationship there. It includes how to address finances and how to use real estate investing to create more income now, and especially to create and build wealth for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And travel is part of that. But I would say that it's really, I get warm fuzzies when I get to talk with people about how to really create a more functional and emotionally safe and financially rich family life.
Okay.
And
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I had a conversation. I was leading a masterclass last week for a group of high functioning entrepreneurial women who most of them were moms. And there was just like this one thing that just a light bulb went off on her. And I was like so internally excited. And it was that she was asking logistically, how do I bring the role of contribution into my family more? And so we talked a little bit about that, and she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna like research like what are ways that we could like serve the homeless, or she identified a few different things locally. And I said, here's what I've learned in about me and my family is I have a tendency to take over, do all the planning, and then tell people where to show up and when. And I said, what I've realized now that my children are older is that there may not be entirely bought in. So what if I could redo my parenting, I would have included my kids in some of these decision-making processes way a long time ago. So this gal has like a 7 and a 5-year-old. And I said, here's what I would suggest trying. Have a conversation with your kids. What do they see in their little 7 and 5-year-old minds that in their world that they could help with? Is it kids in their class, in their kindergarten class, that maybe have worn out shoes and or don't have a winter jacket? Like, have a conversation about what they see and then go from there. And that was just the light bulb moment. She's like, oh my gosh, I tend to overplan and do everything for my family too. So that's an example of just one of those moments where it's like a mindset shift that just was so gratifying for me to see her have that aha moment, which fits into that how to create a more engaged family with entrepreneurs and kind of building that system.
I love that so much, Sherry. And the thing that occurs to me is like, I wonder what she thinks she's paying you for. Like, what is the problem she thinks she's solving with you? And one of the things you said is like, the thing that gives me the warm fuzzies is this. And I'm like, yes, that is about you for sure. And I think it's really important that whatever you do should have the warm and fuzzies to make it sustainable for you. But the way you frame it to who is the question. As you were talking, I'm like, maybe you resolve family conflict. Specifically, you help like parents get their kids to listen to them, which is something that every parent will be like, oh, that's a problem I need to solve right now, so that they can have, financial independence and retire rich because they have more energy or something like that. That's a problem I need to solve now too. So like there's a frame here that is about them and less about what's warm and fuzzy for you, because I'm working on the same thing right now so I can see it. Like, how do you frame it in a problem that's urgent, that needs to be solved, that they will pay you for that? Like, oh my God, let me jump on that. That's exactly what I want. So that you can also do your warm and fuzzy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the what people will pay for, I think for me is the biggest thing for me to solve that nut, because I've done work with clients around like literal real estate investing, and there's a clear, obvious ROI there that's financial bank account. And most of us coaches aren't consulting and doing things that are like, oh, and in 3 months of working with me, you're going to see XYZ amount of money in your bank account. That's not typically what transformational coaching is about or includes. And so how do we think about our ideal client and the value that they need to see internally for themselves, and then figuring out how to translate that into a more tangible result is for me the challenge that I'm continuing to work on.
I love that. I'm actually starting to think, Sherry, we have very similar warm and fuzzies for our coaching. It's like conflict resolution, family stuff. So we should talk more offline about that and see if maybe we should collaborate in coaching. But that's a really cool discussion. I hope our listeners get a lot out of that, because it's two different perspectives on similar questions about what's your ideal client, right? And by the way, everybody, not everybody has it figured out, and you can still have a coaching career. So
absolutely, especially in the beginning. One of the things we see in the coaching mastery community is when people start coaching, they actually don't start coaching because they don't know who their ideal client is. And so I just want to call out the fallacy that you need to know exactly who it is you're going to serve forever to get started. You don't need to know that. Just start coaching whoever you can get access to, and you'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah. And listen to them. You can hear their problems when they tell you, and think about, could I help this person?
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you for that discussion. We still have the third takeaway threat, whatever you want to call it, which is around storytelling, right? And how to use storytelling. We only have a few minutes here, so maybe Sherry, why don't you kick us off? How do you like to use storytelling in your coaching career?
I think there's two specific ways that I use storytelling the most. And I would say the one that I use by far the most is storytelling around my own life. I share and have shared a lot about my life. I tend to be somewhat of an open book within reason and boundaries, but more so than a lot of people. So if you were to look on my feed on Facebook or whatever, like, you can go way back, you'll see me talk about a lot of my wins and successes, and also a lot of my failures and struggles. And I really intentionally try to share a story with it. So even if I share a current challenge I had with one of my kids, for example, it's a storytelling post of like, these are my challenges, this is what I'm experiencing. And then I end the story with a reflection and a question or a challenge to the reader. And how does this play out in your life? Or how would you take this scenario and level up yourself or your kid or your finances, whatever it might be. So I do a lot of storytelling around my own life, what is currently or what has happened. And I do that because I want people to identify with it, kind of like the Me Too, in a kind of a positive attraction way, and help them feel not alone. And that, well, geez, if she's dealing with this and I'm giving confidence that I don't do like a poor me post. Like I see a lot of people, my problem posts are never a poor me, that kind of thing. They're still inspirational. No matter if I'm going through something crappy, they're still inspirational, which is very intentional. And so I want people to be drawn into that. The second type of storytelling posts that I do, not as often, are stories of people that I know or past clients in as, changing the stuff so that they don't accidentally see it and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's sharing all my life. So I make sure that I keep everything vague enough and change the names to protect the innocent and that sort of thing. Sharing stories about my clients, I think, is really important too, because it demonstrates I have clients. And it can share that I have the capacity, the ability, the expertise to help somebody like that, then surely I'd have that ability to them. So both of those are the angles that I tend to use with storytelling in attracting clients. How about you, Daniel? What does that look like for you?
I loved everything you shared, Sherry. Makes me think about my storytelling and how I used to. I've had a long journey on storytelling, and I never used to tell any stories in my communications in general, even within coaching, because I didn't have facility with it. And now I would say there's one big rule of storytelling that I follow, which is the same Daniel's #1 coaching rule, which is it's not about you, it's literally about them, the client, right? So if sometimes I have the need to tell a story because it's like, oh, me too, or like, oh, I want to share about me, but that's not what the coaching relationship is about. It's about them. So it's different with you with a friend. You can say like, oh, let me tell you about this story about this thing that is like the thing you're saying, but you're telling it because you want to share. In coaching, you're telling it because you want to help the client, right? And so there should be a purposefulness to you sharing a story that helps them go towards whatever their life vision, their lighthouse, I call it, is moving them forward. And so I think about, where is the client like thinking stuck? Where is the client struggling? Or what's the topic we're talking about? And how can I help this client? I'm always wondering about, how can I create space for this client to actually break through or move forward? And sometimes it's like, well, we've been talking about this for a little bit. They don't quite get what they need to get here. So maybe I'll be like, there's a really relevant story or anecdote. I do more anecdotes, like short versions of the story. I need to get better at telling longer stories in different contexts, but I'll typically do like a 1 to 3 minute story, maybe 1 to 1.5 minute story most of the time, about something that's happened in my life or that is relevant. So relevance is really important to what we're talking about right now. And sometimes I'll say, I'm sharing this story as a data point or as an external perspective or as a third party to the thing that's happening. It's not exactly, I tend to say it's not exactly the same, but there are probably some similarities that you're noticing for yourself. And I never tell them what the answer is, what the lesson is. I end up saying like, so like, share with me like what went through your mind. What was your takeaway from that story? And then they tell me. I'm like, oh, it's not the thing I thought it was, but it totally worked. Or maybe it didn't work, right? But it had to get them closer. So I like to use stories in that context. And then I also think about like, what's the minimum effective dose of length of this story? Because I could tell the story in a half an hour, but I'm in a session. Time is really valuable. So could I tell this most effective version of the story in 30 seconds or a minute to give them the gist so that they can put the focus back on them processing and thinking? So how can I do that effectively? And I'm not always great at it. Sometimes it takes too long, but I usually try to be very concise with it if I can.
Yeah, I love that. I'll bet, Daniel, when you want to make a story go faster, I think you probably talk faster too. Yeah. You are a ninja at quick talking. I love it.
It's also something I'm working on, right? When I'm in session, I like to actively slow myself down. And when I'm telling a story, I like to slow it down a bit like this. To me, it feels like I'm going so slow, but for the client, it's actually better. So when you're in a session, it's different. But in a conversation, even in a podcast, I should slow down for sure. But we can talk more about that later.
Yeah. So today we had 3 topics that we ran through and gave our perspectives, our experience, our ideas around it. The first one was objection handling and some examples of how we deal with that or how we think about that, kind of how we shift ourselves internally so we are able to deal with that because it's not about us. Daniel's #1 rule and pretty much only rule to coaching is it's not about us. And then we shifted into how do we really figure out who our ideal client is and how does that process work? And then once we have identified that, then it's like, how do we incorporate storytelling to attract more of those clients? And what does that look like in your coaching business? So we touched on all 3 of those things and so appreciate your time and energy and attention in listening. And we trust that you got value and there was at least one nugget that you could totally put into practice now. And be able to increase your capacity and your ability as a coach.
Awesome. Yeah. And thank you, Sherry, for co-hosting this podcast with us. If you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, these are some good topics, or I need support, or I want to be in a community of coaches that are actively building their coaching business and talking about these things and giving support on them, join us. Go to cmc.coach and sign up for a community. It's totally free to join. And then you can start unlocking some of the amazing training we have just by participating and engaging. Ask your wins, ask your questions, post your wins, and we will be there to support you. So just go do that. And you can see there's some other options there for even more support if you want that. But if you don't, you can just participate and engage as a coach building your business, and we'll help you. So
Absolutely.
go to cmc.coach. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Coach's Journey podcast.